"You're just taking up space," my son said, calmly, as though it were a perfectly rational statement. I stood there, arms aching from the basket of unfolded laundry I carried, back screaming from 2 sleepless nights. That was the moment I stopped being afraid to leave. He had just come in from work, loosening his tie at the door. Still in the entryway, I spoke, carefully, almost apologetically. "Callum, I think I need a bit of a break. Just a couple afternoons a week when I'm not watching the kids." My back, I didn't even finish. He turned, exhaled like someone disappointed by a lukewarm cup of tea, and muttered it. "Then you're just taking up space." It didn't land like a slap. It landed like a verdict. I walked back into the kitchen and sat on the edge of the chair I'd been wiping crumbs off of for nearly 4 years. I stared at the floor. The kids were still yelling upstairs. The dishwasher beeped. Nothing around me had changed except me. I'd moved in 3.5 years earlier, just for a while, to help when their first child was born. I brought a suitcase, my knitting bag, and told myself how lucky I was to be needed. But that evening I realized I wasn't needed. I was being used. Dinner's late again. Rowan called out from the living room. I didn't answer. I looked down at my hands instead. The skin had grown thin, the veins branching like faded roads on an old map. These hands had rocked Callum to sleep as a baby, had made his favorite lentil stew when he had the flu, and now they trembled when trying to open a jar. I reached into my purse for the ibuprofen I kept hidden. Swallowed too dry. I didn't want Rowan to see. Didn't want to hear her say the word drama again. "You okay, Mom?" Callum finally asked, stepping into the kitchen. His voice sounded like it had been practiced. I looked up at him. "I just need a little rest, that's all." He gave me a tight, flat smile. "We all do." Then he left the room. I stayed there long after the house went quiet, just breathing in the scent of detergent, old carpet, and something else, something heavier, like silence settling into certainty. The plan had never been to stay. I reminded myself of that every morning during those first weeks. Just until Rowan recovered. Just until Callum adjusted to being a father. Just until the baby started sleeping. Then came the second baby. By then, my things had long since vanished into drawers I hadn't picked. My clothes were hidden behind theirs in the hallway closet. My pillow, the one I'd brought from my tiny old apartment, was the last trace of that former life. My books, my favorite blackcurrant tea, even the framed photo of my late husband remained sealed in boxes somewhere in their garage. "We'll make space soon," Callum had said. That was nearly 3 years ago. When I arrived, I had a room. But soon Rowan's office needed more space, so they moved me downstairs to the den. "Just for now," she said, folding out the futon herself. "It's quieter down here anyway." It was also freezing in winter, stuffy in summer, with no windows and a buzzing ceiling light that always flickered. But I didn't complain. I told myself families make sacrifices. Mothers do what's needed. But slowly, helping turned into duty. Diapers, laundry, dinner, school pickup, bath time, packing lunches. My schedule became more rigid than it ever was while I worked full-time, except now there were no paychecks, no weekends, no acknowledgement. Just a constant loop of doing and disappearing. They didn't mean to be cruel, I think. They just stopped noticing me. Rowan would pass by and ask, "Did you manage to clean the bathroom today?" Never once, "How are you feeling?" Callum would call from the car, "Mom, we're running behind. Can you grab the dry cleaning too?" Never, "Do you want to come with us this Saturday?" And still I said yes. Always yes. Even when my back began to give out. Even when I skipped my own doctor's appointments. Even when I lay in bed at night and cried for reasons I couldn't quite name. I remember one afternoon, maybe half a year ago, I overheard Rowan on the phone in the kitchen. "No, we don't pay her," she said, almost laughing. "She lives here for free. Honestly, it works for both of us. She needs the company, and we need the help. She needs the company." That night I sat alone in the den, surrounded by unfolded laundry and puzzle pieces, and thought, is that how they justify it to themselves? That I'm lucky to be near my grandchildren, and that's enough of a reward? I didn't say anything. I just folded shirts and sorted socks, even though my hands were shaking. I started marking the days by the pain in my spine. The morning stiffness meant it was Wednesday when both kids came home early and the house turned chaotic by mid-afternoon. The sharp twinge under my shoulder blade? That meant it was Friday, laundry day, when I bent over baskets a dozen times. The dull, dragging ache that shot down my leg? That meant it was Sunday, the so-called rest day, when Rowan hosted brunch for her friends and I played the quiet silhouette in the kitchen, pretending not to hear their comments about clingy relatives who didn't understand boundaries. They never said those things to me, but they didn't have to. It's strange how the mind adjusts to quiet humiliation. At some point, I stopped thinking of myself as someone with opinions or preferences. I simply became another cog in their household, no more personal than the vacuum cleaner or the microwave. I'd wake early, fix breakfast, dress the kids, unload the dishwasher, fold laundry, prepare lunch, stop the younger one from coloring on the walls, reheat leftovers for dinner, and tidy the kitchen after everyone else had gone to sleep. My name, Marla, became a convenience. I'd hear Rowan say it on the phone. "Don't worry, Marla will take care of it." Like I was a service, not her husband's mother. Callum never corrected her. I don't think he even noticed. Once, when the doorbell rang and I was elbow-deep in dishwater, Rowan turned to me with that clipped, overly polite tone she reserved for things she'd rather not do herself. "Could you get that, Marla? Could you? Not would you. Not even please." I dried my hands and opened the door. The grocery delivery man stood there, arms straining under 5 heavy bags. He gave me a look, tired, sympathetic, maybe even a little embarrassed, as I reached out to take them. Behind me, Rowan's voice floated from the living room. "Just put the perishables in the fridge. The rest can wait." It was always like that. Small requests stacking up like folding chairs in an empty room. But it wasn't just the chores. It was how I'd vanished from my own story. When guests came by, friends from Rowan's fitness class or Callum's coworkers, I was never introduced. I was background. Once, someone actually asked if I was the help. The help. I repeated the words to myself later that night, sitting on my futon in the basement, whispering them into the dark. I felt more like furniture than family. Even the children, sweet as they sometimes were, absorbed the energy of the house. My grandson once looked up from his tablet and asked, "Grandma, are you going to live here forever?" There was no malice in his voice, just curiosity. But the question still landed hard. I didn't know how to answer. And then came the night that made everything clear. Rowan was upstairs, raising her voice about something, missing socks, I think. Callum was in the kitchen, pacing, speaking far too loudly into his phone, like he always did when trying to sound more confident than he felt. I was in the hallway, sorting through winter coats. I wasn't supposed to hear it. "I don't know, Marcus," he said into the phone. "She's just always here, like a part of the furniture. Honestly, if she stopped helping, I don't know what we'd do. But sometimes. I don't know. Feels like she's just taking up oxygen. Oxygen." I didn't move. My hand was still resting on a child's puffer jacket as that word echoed in my mind. Oxygen. That night, I skipped dinner. Not out of protest. I simply couldn't taste anything. The next morning, I did everything exactly the same. I woke early, made breakfast, dressed the children, cleaned the kitchen. But inside, something had splintered. The quiet voice that had murmured doubts for years finally stood tall. "This isn't a home," it said. "This is a position. One you can be dismissed from at any time." I didn't cry. I was far too tired for tears. That afternoon, I took a walk to the nearby park. The wind bit at my cheeks, and my knees complained with each step, but I needed to feel the sky above me. I watched couples stroll past, older women in pairs, mothers with bundled-up toddlers, teenagers laughing too loudly. I sat on a bench for nearly an hour. No one called to ask where I was. When I returned, dinner was half burnt. Rowan looked up, irritated. "Where were you?" "I had a meeting. You know I can't watch both kids at once." I looked at her flushed, impatient face and said nothing. Later that evening, I went downstairs to the den and pulled out the old suitcase I'd brought with me nearly 4 years earlier. I'd never really unpacked it. I opened it on the futon. It still smelled faintly of the cedar sachets I'd tucked inside, the only thing that still smelled like me. Then I walked to the drawer near the back door, the one where we kept spare keys. I didn't pack in a hurry. This wasn't an escape. There were no slamming drawers, no frantic movements. Just the slow, quiet gathering of things that still belonged to me. A cardigan I'd knitted years ago, worn thin, but warm. My old wallet with a zipper that stuck. A plastic comb. A pair of socks with my initials stitched into the hem, a habit I started when Callum was a boy who always left things behind at school. I sat on the edge of the futon, the suitcase half full, and opened a small box I kept hidden beneath the bed. It was wrapped in plastic, not from neglect, but to keep it safe from curious hands. Inside were the remnants of who I used to be. A slim notebook filled with old poems no one had ever read. A gold ring that no longer fit but once symbolized freedom. And 2 photographs. One of Callum at age 7 grinning, front teeth missing, holding a paper dragon we'd made together on a rainy afternoon. And one of Elijah, my late husband, in his faded navy jacket, standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder the day we signed the lease for our first apartment. He died far too young, but in all our years together, not once did he make me feel like I was in the way. I traced my fingers across Elijah's face and whispered, "You wouldn't have let this happen." Then I slipped the photos into the side pocket of my suitcase. I wasn't leaving them behind. Upstairs, laughter echoed, probably Rowan on the phone, or maybe one of her late-night shows. That house was never quiet. There was always noise, TVs, tablets, the baby monitor, even when no one was crying. But none of it ever reached me. Not really. I looked around the den. It had never truly been my room. The walls were bare. The air carried a faint scent of detergent and something harder to define fatigue, maybe. The only mark I'd left behind was a shallow dent in the futon, where I sat each evening with aching joints and swollen hands. There was a time, not so long ago, when I would have seen leaving as a betrayal. I'd have reminded myself that good mothers don't abandon their families. That grandmothers should feel grateful just to be included. But those stories no longer fit. They pinched in all the wrong places. I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was returning to myself. I zipped the suitcase slowly, quietly, and placed it near the door. Then I sat again, waiting for the house to drift into sleep. Around midnight, I padded into the hallway. No creaks. No lights. The children were asleep. Callum and Rowan's door was closed. A faint hum of white noise came from the nursery. I opened the cabinet near the back door and reached inside. My fingers closed around cold metal, the spare key. It had always hung there, looped on a red ribbon. Rowan used to joke about hating the idea of anyone else holding keys to her house. "Except you, of course," she said once. "You're part of the house." Not anymore. I slid the key into my coat pocket, walked back into the den, and lay down fully dressed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from something stranger. A sharp, exhilarating fear. Like standing at the edge of a dock, just before jumping into water after too many years on dry land. I didn't cry. My eyes stayed dry. My chest was tight, but not from sorrow, only resolve. By dawn, I was up again. The house was silent. I made coffee not because I needed it, but because I always had. I fried eggs, sliced bread, laid out plates. My final act of care. Not in anger, not as a performance. I just didn't want to leave a mess behind. When Callum came downstairs, still tying the belt of his robe, I was sitting at the table, coat zipped, suitcase by my feet. He blinked at me. "Going somewhere?" "Yes." He glanced at the suitcase, then back at me. "Now." I nodded. "I'm not staying here anymore." He rubbed the back of his neck. "What?" "Why? We haven't even talked about. You said I was just taking up space." His mouth opened, then closed. For a brief second, I almost pitied him. "I didn't mean it like that," he mumbled. "I know," I replied. "You meant it exactly the way it came out." He sighed. "Mom, don't be dramatic. Everyone's been under pressure. Rowan's work, the kids, the house, I know," I said, cutting him off. "That's why I stayed as long as I did. But I'm finished now." His posture shifted, defensive, confused. "You're not seriously leaving over one comment?" "It wasn't one," I said softly. "It was 100 small things. This house is built on them." He didn't respond. Just stood there, robe half open, lips pressed thin. I took my coffee cup to the sink, rinsed it, pulled on my gloves, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the door without looking back. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. The morning was cold. The weight of the suitcase made me lean a little to the left, but I welcomed it. That discomfort was mine. Mine to carry. Mine to choose. I had made it about 4 blocks before my phone rang. It was 𝐓𝐨𝐥𝐝. I let it go to voicemail. The 3rd time it rang, I answered. "Mom," he said, breathing hard. "Where are you?" "On my way somewhere else," I replied. My voice was steady. I felt no urge to comfort him. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," I said plainly. A pause. "You didn't even say goodbye to the kids." I swallowed, guilt tapping gently at my ribs, but I pushed it away. They were asleep. And I wasn't going to wake them to explain something you should have explained a long time ago. That's not fair. I stopped walking and stood on the sidewalk, watching a city bus disappear into the gray morning light. Neither is what's been happening in that house for the last 3.5 years. He exhaled, frustrated. "Okay, look, can we just talk later? Maybe come back tonight and we'll sit down, all of us, 𝐓𝐿, I said gently. "There's no we right now." And I ended the call. I didn't check into a hotel. I didn't have the energy to explain anything to a front desk clerk or figure out how to stretch my modest retirement income across nightly rates. Instead, I called Eliza. We hadn't spoken in nearly 7 years. The last time was at her brother's memorial. We'd hugged too tightly, promised to get coffee soon, and of course, never did. But I knew she still lived across the river. Same apartment, same red door, same sharp voice that could cut through fog. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Marla," she said. Her voice startled with recognition. "Hi," I said softly. "It's me." "Marla," she almost shouted. "Lord, I thought you'd vanished." "Are you all right?" I left 𝐓𝐿𝐴𝐿's place. A pause. "You need a place to land?" I closed my eyes. "Just for a few nights. Get over here. You want coffee or tea?" And that was that. I arrived about an hour later. Eliza opened the door wearing a robe and slippers, her hair wrapped in a towel, same as always. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and cat litter, and I had never loved a scent more. She didn't ask why I'd left. She didn't need to. Instead, she brought out a blanket, handed me a chipped mug of strong tea, and turned the living room lamp to its lowest setting. Only after I'd taken off my shoes and finished half the tea did she finally speak. "How long?" 3 years, I said. "Every day?" I nodded. "Figures." "I thought it would feel like freedom," I said quietly. "But right now it just feels like floating in space." "That's because they convinced you your gravity came from them." I looked at her surprised. "What?" "You know," she said with a shrug, "they made you believe you only mattered because they needed you, not because you are you." I sat with that. She leaned back on the couch. "You know, you can stay longer than a few nights." "I'll find something," I said. "I need to stand on my own, Eliza." She nodded, the kind of understanding that only old friends offer, with silence, not speeches. That night, I slept on her couch. The cushions were lumpy, and the ticking of the kitchen clock kept me just shy of deep sleep, but I didn't care. No one expected me to wake early. No little feet came crashing down the hallway. No demands waited in the dark. I lay there in the soft gray light, listening to the wind brushing the windows. And for the first time in years, I wasn't in anyone's way. The next morning, I made toast and eggs for both of us. Partly out of habit, but also out of love. Eliza called me dramatic, of course, but cleaned her plate like she hadn't eaten properly in days. I spent the rest of the morning making calls. A friend from my old congregation gave me the number of a landlord known for renting to retirees. A kind man, she said. Quiet building. Fair price. I left him a message. Then I called my doctor and made an appointment for my back, a proper one. Not squeezed between errands or skipped because someone else needed me more. After that, I sat with a notepad and made a list. It wasn't long, but it felt enormous. Find housing retrieve boxes from Callum's garage, change mailing address, cancel Rowan's gym auto renewal from my cart, keep the key. That last item surprised me. I hadn't meant to write it, but once I saw it, I didn't cross it out. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Rowan. I let it go to voicemail and listened to the message while sipping tea. Her voice was clipped, tight with control. "Miriam, we need to talk. This isn't how adults handle things. We had an arrangement. Please call back." I didn't. Instead, I turned to Eliza and asked if she wanted to take a walk. We moved slowly through familiar streets, both of us bundled in scarves, wrapped in silence and something that felt like peace. She didn't ask what I planned to do next. She just slipped her arm through mine and said, "About damn time." 2 days passed before Callum showed up in person. It was late afternoon. Eliza and I had just returned from the market. We were unpacking groceries in her narrow kitchen. She was mid-rant about the price of avocados when the doorbell rang. I froze. She looked at me. "You expecting someone?" "No," I said. But I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Callum stood there, jacket unzipped, eyes tired, mouth pressed in that way people do when they're trying to look composed and failing. He looked older than he had just days before. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly now. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We stared at each other for a few seconds. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Eliza raised an eyebrow from the kitchen, then disappeared upstairs without a word. She'd always known when to exit the scene. Callum stood awkwardly in a small living room, out of place among the crocheted throws and cat figurines. He glanced at the couch. "You're staying here?" "For now." He nodded. This is a bit sudden, Mom." "It wasn't sudden," I said. "It just looked that way from your side." He winced. "Look, I know what I said was harsh. I was frustrated. I didn't mean it the way it came out." "You meant it exactly the way it came out," I said quietly. He sighed and sat down, rubbing his hands together. "Rowan's upset." I nearly laughed. "Rowan's upset," he repeated. "She says the kids are confused. They keep asking where you are. I'm sure she found something to tell them. She said you were visiting a friend." "Well," I said, "at least that's not a lie." He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, there was something raw in his expression. Not guilt, not quite. But maybe, finally, the beginning of recognition. "I didn't think it was that bad," he said. "You never asked. You never said anything." "Because I didn't know how," I said. "Because every time I tried, it turned into how hard things were for you, or for Rowan, or for the kids. There was never room for my words," I said. Callum stayed quiet. "You used to call after work, just to talk. You used to ask how I was." I paused. "When did that stop?" "I don't know. You stopped seeing me, Callum. You saw what I did, but not who I was." He leaned back, staring up at the ceiling like he expected the answer to be written in the plaster. "I thought we were all just doing our best. You were doing what was convenient," I said. I was disappearing. He sat forward, elbows on knees. "So, what now? Are you going to stay here forever? Cut us off." I shook my head. "I don't want to cut anyone off. But I'm not coming back to be your invisible support system." "That's not fair," he said again, weakly. I looked straight at him. Fair would have been letting me be a grandmother. Not a backup spouse. Not unpaid staff. Just someone who could love her grandkids without breaking her back. He looked down at the floor. "I've already started looking for a place," I told him. "I'll be moving into my own apartment by the end of the month." "Mom," I raised my hand. Don't make this about how hard it'll be without me. I know it'll be hard. That's not my responsibility to fix anymore." His mouth opened, then closed. After a moment, he gave a slight nod. Okay, I echoed. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a key, the spare one, still looped with a red ribbon. "You took this," he said. "I did." He held it out. "Here." I didn't reach for it. "I want you to have it," he said, quieter now. I was going to ask for it back. Rowan insisted. "But I want you to have it, in case you ever want to come back. As a guest. As my mother." I took the key, not because I needed it, but because, for the first time, I understood what it meant to hold something without owing anyone anything. We sat in silence for a moment longer. "I'll walk you out," I said. At the door, he turned and looked at me. "I miss you." I nodded. "That's a start." And then he was gone. I closed the door gently, resting my forehead against the wood. Eliza appeared behind me. Well, she said, that looked human. I let out a short, surprised laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. She pulled me into a hug, firm, awkward, real. Don't let him off the hook too easy, she said. I won't. That evening, I opened my purse and looked at the key resting in my palm. I turned it over once, then again, before placing it in a small ceramic dish on the nightstand. It no longer meant obligation. It no longer meant sacrifice. It just meant choice. The apartment was smaller than I imagined, but sunlight spilled through the east-facing windows like a quiet promise. It's nothing fancy, the landlord had warned me on the phone. But it's peaceful, and the neighbors keep to themselves. That was all I wanted. The building sat at the end of a quiet street, plain red brick, ivy trailing up one side like it had forgotten this wasn't a storybook. Just a place for people passing through. When I stepped inside for the first time, my hand brushed the narrow entryway wall, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: privacy. No dishes in a sink that weren't mine. No baby monitor buzzing. No footsteps overhead. Just the hum of the radiator, the creak of old floors, and the steady rhythm of my own breath. That first night, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't need to. I woke when the sunlight reached my bed, not from shouting, not from pots banging or crying in the hallway. Just light and stillness. I lay there, listening to the unfamiliar hush. It was like being reintroduced to silence after a long estrangement. I didn't unpack much that day, just what I needed. Clothes. Toiletries. The 2 framed photos I'd carried from that basement den, Callum as a boy, missing teeth and holding a paper dragon, and Robert, smiling in that worn jacket of his. I placed them on the narrow kitchen shelf beside a thrifted mug I'd picked up on the walk over. It read, "You've survived everything so far. You'll survive this too." By midday, I was hungry, but not for food. I wanted motion. I needed rhythm again. Something that belonged to me. So I walked to the library. 5 blocks away, tucked between a bakery and a shuttered tailor shop. A modest building with peeling blue paint and a cracked stone bench out front. I hadn't held a library card in over a decade. The librarian, a woman in her early 60s with tired eyes and a soft, certain voice, smiled when I approached the counter. "First time in a while?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "First time on my own terms." She didn't ask what I meant. She just handed me the form. I left with 2 books, 1 novel, 1 cookbook, and a quiet, steady feeling in my chest, like I'd recovered something I hadn't even realized was lost. Later, I wandered into the cafe next door. It was small, cluttered, overgrown with plants, mismatched chairs, and fading chalkboard menus. The kind of place where people come to write, to think, to be left alone. The young man behind the counter had a beard like tangled ivy and ink-lined hands. "What can I get you?" he asked. "Just tea," I said. He nodded, then paused. "You new around here?" I smiled. "Something like that." "Welcome," he said. And he meant it. I took my cup to a corner table, opened the novel, and read for nearly an hour, without interruption, without expectation, without being needed. No one asked me to pick anyone up, fold anything, or explain why the potatoes were overcooked. I lost track of time, and when I noticed the sunlight had shifted across the floor, I didn't panic. This was mine. That evening, back in the apartment, I sat by the window and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Voicemail picked up. "Hi, sweetie," I said after the beep. "It's Grandma. Just wanted to say I miss you. Hope you're doing well in school. I'm in a new place now. When your dad thinks it's okay, maybe you can come visit." I'd love that. I hung up and set the phone down gently. No expectations. Just a message released into the world, like a paper boat floating across a still pond. For dinner, I made pasta, nothing elaborate, just garlic and olive oil. I poured a glass of water, lit a candle, no occasion, just because. For no reason. For every reason. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was spacious. It had room for me. Later, I drew a bath. Let the warmth seep into the worn places, knees, back, shoulders. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. Afterward, wrapped in the robe Eliza had insisted I take, it's old, like us, but still soft, I padded across the apartment and sat at the little desk near the window. I opened a new notebook and wrote across the first page, Day 1. Not someone's burden, just myself. I underlined it twice. Then I looked out at the quiet street below. The lampposts had just begun to glow, and something shifted inside me. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was the lifting of fog. Not sadness, either. Just the slow, steady return of myself. Nearly a week passed before I heard anything from that house. Not Callum. Not Rowan. Not even the kids. The silence wasn't cruel. It was calculated. Careful. As if they were waiting on me to make the first move. As if I had been the one who made everything difficult by leaving. But I had nothing left to smooth over. The apartment was still half empty. Just a few rugs, some dishes, my clothes folded neatly in a closet that held only my things. The television hadn't been touched. I liked it that way. I didn't need noise. I needed space. On the 7th day, the phone rang. I was in the kitchen, steeping a proper cup of tea loose leaf with a bit of lavender. When the screen lit up, my chest tightened. Ollie, my grandson. I dried my hands and answered. Grandma? His voice was uncertain, like he wasn't sure which version of the world he was dialing into. Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay? I closed my eyes. I am now. Dad said you were visiting a friend, but you didn't call. And Mom gets mad when I ask about you. I sat down slowly. I left, Ollie. I moved out. Because of something we did? No, baby. Not because of you. A long silence followed. I could hear the background hum of a television, the faint clatter of dishes. I miss you, he said. My throat tightened. I miss you too. Can I come see you? I'd love that, I said softly. But we have to wait. Your parents need time to figure out how they feel. It's complicated right now. Why? He asked. Because your mother never saw me as anything more than free labor. Because your father forgot how to be a son. Because I let it all happen. But instead, I said, sometimes grown-ups forget how to be kind. And then they need time to remember. Another pause. I remember, he said. You made me pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I laughed gently. I did. They didn't taste like dinosaurs, though. Maybe next time they will. Maybe. I'll try harder. Promise? I promise. When we hung up, I sat at the table, my tea now cooling, a soft smile on my face as real as the ache in my chest. Children forgive faster than adults. But they also notice more. I'd always suspected Ollie knew something wasn't quite right in that house. Not terrible. Not explosive. Just not warm. The next day, I found a letter. A real one. Tucked into my mailbox, folded 3 times and sealed with a unicorn sticker, slightly off-center. Written in thick crayon. Dear Grandma, please come back or let me come to you. I miss how your house smelled. I miss you. Love, Ollie P.S. I hid the blue car in your purse the last day. You didn't find it yet. I opened my handbag and there it was. A tiny blue toy car wedged between tissues and a cough drop. I held it in my palm for a long moment. I didn't cry. Not quite. But something inside softened in a way it hadn't since I zipped that suitcase shut. That evening, I wrote him back. Dear Ollie, I found the blue car. Sneaky boy. Thank you for your letter. I miss you too. I can't come back to the house right now, but maybe one day you can come visit me here. We'll make dinosaur pancakes again. Love, Grandma P.S. Bring the red car next time. They can race. I didn't know if Rowan would let him read it, but I wrote it anyway. I slid it into an envelope, walked it to the mailbox in my slippers, and let it go. 2 days later, the call came. Early evening. I was chopping onions halfway through a soup recipe I hadn't made in years. The kind that needed patience, depth, and time. All things I had again now. When the phone buzzed and I saw Callum's name, I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before picking up. Mom, he said, voice tight. Yes, we need to talk. I turned off the stove. Are you asking or demanding? A pause. I'm asking. I sat down at the small kitchen table. All right, Callum. Talk. He didn't start with an apology. He never did. Instead, Rowan's upset that you're writing to Ollie. She says it's confusing him. I closed my eyes. Counted to 3. Did you read his letter? I asked. What? The one he sent me. Did you read it? He hesitated. Rowan did. So, secondhand concern. As usual. Mom, no, you asked to talk, I said. So listen. The silence on the line felt like a breath held too long. I didn't leave because of one sentence, though it was a sharp one I began. I left because I'd been fading in your house for nearly 4 years. Because my health didn't matter. My time wasn't mine. Because kindness had quietly been replaced with obligation. I heard him swallow. I gave and gave 𝐓𝐨𝐥𝐝. And I would have kept giving if anyone had once said, Mom, are you all right? Or even just thank you. But instead, I got schedules. Silence. And eventually, I got told I was just taking up space. His voice dropped. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? He was quiet again. I did all of it because I love you, I continued. But love isn't a blank check. And it doesn't mean I stopped being a person. A long pause. Then, we were drowning. 2 kids, work, everything. You were the only thing holding it all together. And not one of you noticed I was sinking, too. He exhaled. So what now? You've cut us off. No, I said calmly. I just stopped volunteering to be erased. You could have told me. I tried. You weren't listening. He didn't argue. That alone felt like new territory. Ollie misses you, he said after a moment. He doesn't understand why you're not around. I'm still here. He has my address. He's heard my voice. But I'm not coming back to be your safety net. And Rowan. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. That's your marriage to figure out. She wants things the way they were. I know, I said. But I don't. Silence again. But it was a different kind now. Not defensive. Not resentful. Just still. The kind that happens when someone realizes they won't win the argument because it was never an argument at all. It was the truth. I don't know how to fix this, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to, I replied. Just don't make it harder. He let out a slow breath. Okay, I repeated. I'll talk to Rowan. About Ollie. The letters. The visits. I hope you do. I was about to end the call when he added softly, You sound different. I feel different. He didn't ask what I meant. I don't think he wanted to know. When I hung up, the kitchen felt warmer. The soup was still simmering softly now. I stirred it slowly, the scent of garlic and thyme rising with the steam. No one else was coming home to eat it. And that was fine. I was still worth feeding. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote another letter to Ollie. Not because I owed him an explanation. Because he deserved a voice that wasn't filtered through conflict. Dear Ollie, grown-ups sometimes forget how to say sorry. But I want you to know you didn't do anything wrong. I'm in a new place now. I'm okay. And I love you always. Love, Grandma P.S. I hope the blue car is winning. I signed the lease on a rainy Tuesday morning. The landlord, Mr. Keene, was a quiet man with soft eyes and fingers stained from newspaper ink. He shook my hand and said, Welcome home. And I nearly cried in the hallway. The apartment was modest. 2 rooms and a kitchenette. A window that looked out onto a narrow courtyard with one stubborn tree growing sideways, then straight up, like it had changed its mind halfway through. The walls needed paint. The closet door stuck. The shower took 10 minutes to warm up. But it was mine. I paid the deposit with a check in my name. I filled out the paperwork alone. No one hovered over my shoulder. No one questioned my choice. No one called to ask why I didn't pick something closer or cheaper or temporary. And as I stepped inside, carrying the small box Eliza had packed for good luck, I realized something simple and staggering. I hadn't made a decision just for myself in years. Not really. Everything had been for someone else. Moving in with 𝐓𝐨𝐥𝐝. Changing doctors to match the kids' school schedule. Canceling a long-planned trip because the baby had colic. I had been accommodating. Always. Endlessly. Now I had a front door with a lock only I controlled. A calendar with no one else's appointments. A key I didn't have to return. That afternoon, I hung curtains I found in a clearance bin, sunny yellow, with tiny stitched birds along the hem. I didn't choose them for anyone else's taste. I chose them because they made the light feel warmer. I brewed tea and drank it standing at the window, watching it steep into something strong. I watched as the wind shook the branches of that crooked courtyard tree, its leaves spinning toward the ground like loose thoughts finally ready to land. I was still learning how to fill hours that weren't taken from me. Some mornings, I woke expecting to hear a baby crying. My hand would reach instinctively for a monitor that wasn't there anymore. Muscle memory, like grief, takes time to fade. But other days, I woke slowly. I made eggs, sat on the floor, stretched my legs without interruption, read whatever I wanted, and wandered to the market with no list, just because I could. I bought a tiny succulent and named her Ruth. She lived on the windowsill beside my notebook. I didn't expect her to thrive, but she did anyway. One afternoon, I stood in the center of the living room and realized I could arrange the furniture however I pleased. I moved the table into a corner, set a chair by the window, shifted the shelves to hold only what I loved, not what matched, not what might impress guests. Just what made sense to me. It was a quiet kind of joy. And little by little, without ceremony, I began to feel like a woman again. Not a fixture, not a utility, not someone temporarily tolerated, just a woman, with soft socks, a working kettle, and a list of things she wanted to do. One of those things was seeing my doctor. The same woman I used to cancel on 3 times in a row because the kids had fevers or Callum needed the car. She examined my spine, asked thoughtful questions I hadn't heard in years. She didn't rush. She listened. "You've been pushing too hard," she said gently. "Your back needs rest. Not more lifting. Not more standing all day. It needs care." "I know," I said. And for once, I truly did. We made a plan. Gentle stretches. Short walks. No toddlers on hips. No chasing juice spills across a sticky floor. Just care for me. That night, I took the heating pad out of its box and plugged it in beside the chair. I sat with it for 30 minutes, eyes closed, letting the warmth sink in. It felt like an apology I had owed myself for a long time. Later, I opened the notebook and wrote, "Day__, my body is not a resource. It is a home. I have to treat it like one." I underlined that sentence 3 times. The next morning, I got a call from the library. They were looking for volunteers, specifically older adults, to help during children's reading hour. I smiled into the phone. I'd love to, but only on Wednesdays. Choice, not obligation. When I hung up, I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the cool morning light. My back still ached, but this time it was on my terms. The first time Ollie visited my new apartment, he stood in the entryway for almost a full minute, just looking around. "This is it?" he asked, wide-eyed. "This is it," I said. "It's small. It's enough." I opened the door wider. "Come in." He stepped across the threshold slowly, like he was entering not just a new place, but a sacred one. His backpack bounced behind him, stuffed with books and a Tupperware Rowan had insisted he bring. "Pasta, something real to eat," she wrote in a note Callum had quietly tucked into my mailbox. Her way of reminding me who still thought she held the reins. But not today. Today was mine. Ollie dropped his bag on the couch and turned in a circle. "Where's the TV?" "I don't have one." "No TV?" "Nope." He blinked. "So, what do we do?" I walked into the kitchen and returned with a tray. On it, a small stack of old board games, 2 paper cups, a bowl of popcorn, and a tiny toy car with a note taped to its hood. "Let's race again." "Love, Grandma." His face lit up. We played for 2 hours, Connect 4, Ben cards. We tried to make a paper airplane that could circle the entire room, but it kept crash-landing into Ruth. She survived. He asked questions. "Why did you leave?" I didn't lie. Because I was tired. My back hurt. And no one was listening to me. He frowned. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to fix it," I said gently, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "You're a kid. That was never your job." He nodded slowly. "But I missed you. A lot. I missed you too. We didn't dwell. Children know when the air gets too heavy." He moved on. "Can I come next week too? If your parents say yes." "What if they don't?" "Then we'll figure out another way." Later, we baked cookies. I let him crack the egg. Half the shell fell in. We laughed so hard I nearly forgot what silence used to feel like. While the cookies were in the oven, he wandered to the bookshelf and picked up a photo frame. "Is that Grandpa?" "Yes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. His name was Nathan. "He looks kind." He was. He stared at the picture for a long moment. "Did he ever live here?" "No," I said. "He died before I moved in. But I think he would have liked this place." "Why?" "Because it's quiet. And it's mine." When Callum came to pick him up, he didn't come to the door. He waited in the car. I stood at the window and watched Ollie wave goodbye, racing down the steps, cookie crumbs still clinging to his cheek, his backpack bouncing with every step. Callum looked up once. Our eyes met. He gave a small nod. I gave nothing back. Not yet. That evening, I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, and the tree in the courtyard swayed gently in the breeze. No voices. No expectations. Just the lingering echo of a child's laughter and the faint scent of vanilla from a candle still burning. I opened my notebook. Day 10A visit is not a transaction. It's a gift. I don't have to earn it. I just have to show up. Then I lit another candle. Not for any special reason. Only because it was enough. Because I was enough. They didn't call first. Didn't check if I was free. Just one knock, firm, fast, unmistakable. And there they were. Callum, wearing a wool coat he hadn't bothered to button. Rowan beside him, arms crossed, her purse clutched like a shield. They both looked like people who had rehearsed their lines on the drive over. I didn't move to greet them. "Hi," Callum said. Rowan gave a single nod, eyes scanning the hallway behind me, searching for what? A mess? An unpaid bill? A reason to reestablish control. "Can we come in?" he asked. I stepped aside without a word. They entered, glanced around, said nothing. There was nothing to hide. The apartment was clean. The kettle still warm. A book rested on the chair and a folded blanket waited by the window. They sat stiffly close together but distant, like strangers sharing a delayed train. Rowan spoke first. "We wanted to talk in person." I nodded. She glanced at Callum, then back to me. "It's been complicated. For all of us." Another nod. "We feel like you made a very sudden decision," she continued, voice tight. "And it put us in a difficult spot." There it was. "I didn't make it suddenly," I replied. "I made it quietly over a very long time." Callum looked up. "Mom, she's not saying you didn't have the right, just that maybe we could have handled things differently if we'd known how serious it was." I breathed in. "Slow. You knew." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't expect you to leave." "No," I said. "I know. I wasn't supposed to. I was supposed to stay. To endure. To be convenient." "That's not fair," she said sharply. Neither was being used as a full-time nanny and housekeeper without a single conversation about what I needed. Her jaw tightened. "You never said no." "No," I said softly. "I didn't. Because I loved you all. And I thought that was the same thing as being needed." Silence. Callum cleared his throat. "Ollie misses you." "I know. He's been writing letters. I've been writing back." Rowan looked like she wanted to object, but Callum raised a hand. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "We came to ask if you'd consider coming back. Even part-time." I looked at them, two people who once stood in front of me in wedding clothes, wide-eyed and grateful. I had given them my blessing, my time, my home. And still, they didn't understand. "No," I said. Rowan sat up straighter. "Excuse me." "No," I repeated calmly. "I won't be coming back." Callum leaned forward, voice lower. "Not even a few hours a week? We could pay you. Set clear boundaries. Make it fair." "It's not about money," I said. "It's about value. We're offering respect." Rowan interjected quickly. I gave a slow, sad smile. Offering respect now after taking it for granted isn't respect. It's negotiation. Silence again. Behind us, the kettle clicked off, finished boiling. "I love Ollie," I said. "I will always be his grandmother. But I will not trade my peace for proximity." Callum swallowed hard. "So that's it?" I stood. "That's it." Rowan rose too, her purse now clutched tightly under one arm. "You don't have to be cruel." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just not willing to be erased anymore." They moved toward the door. Before stepping out, Callum paused and turned. His voice was quieter now. "If Ollie asks again about visiting, let him come." I nodded. Rowan didn't say anything. They left. I closed the door behind them, locked it, leaned against the wood, and breathed. Not triumph, not relief, clarity. That night, I poured the hot water, watched steam rise, and thought of all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. All the times I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. No more. I opened my notebook. Day 11 saying no isn't selfish. It's sacred. I turned off the lights, left the candle burning, and let the silence take its rightful place. Ollie started visiting every other Saturday. Callum would drop him off without coming inside. He parked across the street, engine running, hand resting on the steering wheel like he might need to flee at a moment's notice. I didn't wave. He didn't either. It was a quiet exchange. A child passed from habit into love. Ollie never asked about the silence between me and his parents. Children know where not to press. Instead, he ran up the steps, cheeks pink from wind, arms open like I was the only solid thing in his world. He always brought something. A toy. A drawing. Once, a rock he claimed looked like a turtle if you squinted. I kept it anyway. It sits on the shelf beside Ruth, next to the framed photo of Nathan, as if it's always belonged there. The little rock Ollie brought, the one that looked like a turtle if you squinted. We didn't make plans. We just lived into the day. Pancakes sometimes. A walk, if the weather allowed. Stories mine, his, or ones we made up together. He started asking more questions. About Grandpa. About when his dad was his age. About what I did before I lived in what he now calls the basement room. I told him about the books I used to love. About the library job I almost took after high school, but didn't because Callum came along and life took a different shape. I didn't say it with bitterness, just with truth. Truth held gently. Ollie told me about school, how math was boring, how his friend Milo sometimes lied just to make people laugh, how Rowan once cried in the car when she thought no one was looking, how Callum stayed up late staring at his phone like it held a better version of life. I listened. Not to fix, just to hear. And when it was time for him to leave, he always hugged me twice, once at the door and once at the bottom of the steps. Like he didn't want to let the day end completely. I started keeping a drawer just for him. A puzzle. Some crayons. Socks he always forgot. I never called it his room, but he understood. It was space made just for him, given freely, not taken. Other things shifted, too. Eliza began dropping by more often, always with something in hand. Cookies. A newspaper clipping. Once, a horrendous ceramic bird she found at a garage sale. "It's hideous," she declared. "And you deserve it." I set it on the windowsill. It makes me laugh every morning. The library offered me a small part-time role. Just a few hours each week, helping with children's reading groups and reshelving books. I said yes. Not because I needed to stay busy, but because I wanted to feel useful on my own terms. Some afternoons, I'd wander to the cafe, the one with too many plants and chipped mugs. The barista knows my order now. Miriam's blend, he calls it. Black tea, splash of milk, pinch of cinnamon. I never correct him. Let him think it's something special. And it is. One evening, just before closing, I sat there with my tea and notebook. The lights were low. The music soft, the kind that sounds like open skies and empty roads. I wrote, day __, I was never meant to live only in service. My hands know how to hold more than responsibility. I paused, tapped my pen, then added, and my voice still knows how to speak without permission. It wasn't anger I felt. It was steadier, quieter, a return. Outside, the streetlights blinked on. I pulled on my coat, paid my bill, and walked home past rows of windows glowing with other people's lives I didn't envy. I didn't want their noise, their clutter, or their endless compromises. I wanted my tea, my drawer of crayons, my crooked plant, my small, sacred, unbothered corner of the world. And I had it. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in tight, elegant handwriting, the kind taught by nuns or grandmothers who cared about posture and penmanship. I turned it over in my hands. It wasn't from Ollie. His handwriting still danced across the page with too many loops and unpredictable spacing. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside, just one page, a folded sheet of stationery that smelled faintly of soap and flowers. Miriam, I'm not good at saying things out loud. I think you've always known that. You leaving changed things more than I knew it could. I told myself for years I was doing everything right, work, family, marriage, and that everything else would sort itself out. I didn't realize how much I was asking you to disappear. I'm sorry. Not just for what I said that night, but for all the small ways I stopped being your son and started treating you like a safety net. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't know if I even deserve that. But I want Ollie to grow up knowing how to treat people with care. I want him to remember that when someone walks away, you don't wait for them to fix it. You go to them. So this is me, coming to you. If you ever feel ready, I'd like to visit. Not to ask for anything, just to sit. Maybe we could have tea. Love, Callum. I folded the letter and set it on the table. Then I sat down and let the silence settle around me. There was no anger left. Not anymore. Just a strange, steady softness. Like something bruised had finally been left alone long enough to heal. I didn't rush to respond. I went about my day. I watered Ruth. I swept the floor. I made a small pot of soup and added too much time, then laughed out loud at myself. The kind of laugh that comes when you realize you're allowed to make small, harmless mistakes because no one's watching. And no one needs it perfect. Later that afternoon, I pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write, Callum, thank you for your letter. It mattered. I'm not ready for a visit yet, but I'm not close to the idea. I need time. Time to keep being who I've become without slipping back into who I was in your house. I think you understand that now. You were right about Ollie. He needs to learn care. And that starts with how he sees us treat one another. So maybe one day, yes, we'll have tea. But for now, I'm here. And I'm okay. Love, Mom. I sealed the envelope, wrote Callum's name across the front, and walked it to the postbox. The air was crisp. Leaves danced along the sidewalk like children late for school. No fanfare. No announcement. Just one letter among many, but different. That night, I sat by the window with my usual tea and opened my notebook. Day 14 healing isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives folded in an envelope, saying just enough. I looked once more at the letter on the table before turning off the light, and I smiled, not because it was fixed, but because something had finally found the space to begin. The key still sits in a ceramic dish by the door, not because I plan to use it, not because I'm waiting to be asked, but because it reminds me of something I once forgot. I have always held the power to leave. I just didn't believe I was allowed. Now I know better. My days are quiet. Steady. I wake without dread. I move through the rooms of this small place with purpose, not urgency. The walls are lined with things I chose, not inherited, not given with strings, not clutter meant to justify presence. Just what I love. Ruth, the plant, keeps growing sideways toward the light. I've stopped trying to straighten her. Some things bloom best when left to lean. Ollie still visits. We've started writing stories together. Short, strange tales about dragons who bake bread instead of guarding treasure, or owls who open libraries in the tallest trees. He always asks, can the characters be a little weird? I always say yes. He never calls it your apartment. He calls it your house. There's a difference. Last week, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked. The lines around my mouth. The soft slope of my shoulders, shoulders that once carried an entire household, now carrying only a coat. I didn't frown. I didn't adjust the angle or lift my chin. I simply looked and whispered, you made it. I've started going to a chair yoga class at the rec center. Eliza came once. She laughed so hard when she tipped sideways that the instructor had to pause the session. We still bring it up like it was a historic moment. Tell my cats I love them, she says, falling dramatically onto the couch. Last week, she brought me a second ceramic bird statue. This one's even worse, she grinned. I kept them both. Sometimes column texts. Nothing heavy. Just, Ollie lost his red car. Did he leave it with you? Or, I remembered that pie you used to make. Miss it? He never pushes. Never assumes. We're learning each other again, slowly, carefully, without shame. And Rowan? Well, some people grow. Some people learn. And some people simply step aside and let the rest of us do what we must. That's enough for now. I've been thinking about how many women like me are out there. Quiet, tired, helping, hoping someone sees them. So if you are one of them, let me say this. You are not just background. You are not just a solution. You are not too old, too late, or too tired. You have the right to rest. You have the right to speak. You have the right to leave. And yes, you also have the right to stay. But only if staying feeds you too. I light a candle most nights, even when I'm alone. Especially when I'm alone. Not for ambience, but as a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still me. And if you're reading this and something in it feels familiar, like a thought you've never said out loud or a sentence you never gave yourself permission to finish, let this be your sign. You can go. You can start. And you do not need permission. Sweetheart, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a little note in the comments. I love hearing from you.